Chapter 10. Brannon. 26 Saloon, 575 AF. God's curse this stupid rain, I muttered, scowling into the fireplace at the sodden wood I was trying to light. Burn, damn you! The others watched me with wide eyes as they huddled under their blankets. It had been raining for days, the freezing, miserable rain of early spring which soaked everything, including our woodpile. The flint shook in my hands, my body trembling with both the chill and my frustration. I had been unable to get the fireplace lit for nearly half an hour, and a part of me wanted to rip the whole cursed thing from the wall and toss it into the western ocean. I took a deep breath and tried once more. It didn't light. I swore and tossed the flint as hard as I could against the far wall. The clatter it made was far from satisfactory, and I growled as I punched the floor. My anger was clawing at me. I hated being trapped inside, the walls closing in around me. "Brannon, the floor!" Chris's startled shout made me glance down, and I jerked back in alarm, away from the small pocket of flames on the floor beside me. She rushed over and stamped it out. "Sorry, Chrissa." I stared at the burns in dismay. "I don't even know how that happened." Her brows drew together, and she knelt. She gingerly touched the scorch marks, and I realized they looked like the grooves of fingers. Brannon? My fingers. I set my jaw. I didn't know what it meant any more than she did, but I was willing to try anything if it meant not using the cursed flint. I bit my lip, concentrating, and held my hand over the wood in the fireplace. The others were silent. I think they held their breath as the long minutes dragged past. I had been angry when I punched the floor, and I focused my frustrations on the wood in the fireplace, willing it to burn. Nothing happened. Sweat began to form on my brow in effort, and my head began to throb. Finally, I felt it, a faint, cool sensation on the back of my neck, like the trickle of water on a hot summer's day, a slow release of tension, like a coiled spring calmly unwound. The fireplace exploded. I was sent flying backward, colliding with the table. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Chrissa and Lanya dive for the younger children, shielding them from the sharp, jagged pieces of brick that shot across the room. I found myself prone on the floor, staring as blue flames roared in the blackened fireplace, consuming the wood in mere moments, leaving only ash and choking smoke. The room was suddenly sweltering. I sat up slowly, groaning at the ache in my shoulder where I had struck the table. The floor around me was speckled with embers. I did my best to stomp them out before they caused any more damage, for the first time thankful that our father was with the crone. Chrissa began to laugh. I gaped at her in surprise, which only seemed to make her laugh harder. The others joined her, nearly helpless in their hilarity, and I stared at them in confusion. Lanya at last had pity on me, swallowing her laughter long enough to fetch a mirror. I had no eyebrows. They had been completely burned off, leaving my face looking perpetually startled. Much of my hair was still smoldering, and black streaks lined my face. I looked ridiculous. I joined in the laughter, unable to help myself. We collapsed to the floor, laughing until tears ran down our faces. "Perhaps you're a fire mage," Elixir commented later, after we had cleaned up the mess I had made. Father had returned from the crones, but he had not noticed the scorch marks in the fireplace, nor my missing brows, before he had lurched into his room and slammed the door. "Don't be stupid," Kylie sneered. "Fire mages only exist in stories." "You're stupid. They're real. All the great mages are." "Even dark mages?" "Yeah, maybe. I don't know, but I know fire mages are real." Chrissa glanced up from brushing Lanya's hair and held up a hand to end the argument. "Elixir, why don't you explain what fire mages are? Then we can figure out if Brannon is one." He stuck his tongue out at Kylie. "According to the stories, The first great mages came about during the Great War, when the younger gods overthrew the evil elder gods. The gods needed champions. Like us? Rhys interrupted. No. He paused, frowning, thinking it over. Well, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, the goddess Natura. Why do the gods even need champions? Kylie demanded. They're gods, aren't they? What could we do that they can't? Elixir glared. Can I finish the story? I just think it's stupid. Quiet, Kylie. Chris's fingers darted through Lanya's hair, braiding it. It's rude to interrupt. You may ask your questions at the end. Sorry, Chrissa. As I was saying, the goddess Natura went to all the guardians of Caerdia and... Guardians? Rhys looked confused. What guardians? Elixir growled. The guardians are the beings created by destiny before the gods came to Caerdia, Chrissa explained patiently. They protect the elements that were used to create the world. Like dragons, Lanya added. Or golems. Oh. Hush now, dear heart. Let Elixir finish his story. So Natura went to all the guardians and asked them for help with the elder gods, who were evil. The guardians said they couldn't help directly. Why not? Rhys. Sorry, Chrissa. The guardians said they couldn't help directly because it would destroy the world. Instead, they created the great mages, who had the same powers, but were human. The others all began to ask questions at once, until Chrissa raised a hand. One at a time. Kylie sat up on her elbow. Why couldn't elves become great mages, or dwarves? I don't know. He shrugged. The book said it was because men are the weakest of the races. Maybe they thought it would make us stronger. Or turn us into bullies, she muttered darkly. Rhys raised his hand politely, waiting to be called on. Did the great mages really defeat the elder gods? Yes, that's why we serve the younger gods now, because during the Great War the mages overthrew the elder gods and stripped them of their powers. Lanya started to turn around, and Chrissa gripped her head to keep it still. Are great mages really like guardians? I mean, are fire mages just human dragons? Not quite, he frowned. The great mages are human elements, the ones the guardians protect. Fire mages can do a lot of incredible things, but they can't fly, so they're not really dragons. What can they do? I asked finally, curious. They create fire. They never get burned. They can make firestorms. Oh, and they can see the future. Really? That's what the book said. Have you seen the future, Brandon? Rhys stared at me, wide-eyed. Sure I have, I joked. It said we were all going to be rich one day and live in the palace and eat cake with the emperor. He made a face at me. You're making that up. Of course he is, Kylie snapped, exasperated. We never get cake. Rhys stuck his tongue out at her. Do you think Brandon is a fire mage, Chrissa? Lanya asked quietly, turning to look up at her sister. Well, I don't, I answered for her. It was just a stupid accident. Having a little fire magic doesn't make me a great mage. I pointed at my face. I'm not even fireproof. I burned off my own eyebrows, for God's sake. Lanya giggled. I think we'll figure out what Brandon is in time, Chrissa said gently. I also think that it's time for bed. The others groaned, but tromped off dutifully to our bedroom. I lingered, watching as Chrissa stood and carefully banked the fire. The scorch marks on the stones seemed to mock me, and I swallowed, suddenly afraid. Chrissa? Yes, dear heart? I'm dangerous, aren't I? She gazed at me, her emerald eyes dark and intense upon my face. Aren't we all? I had no answer, and so I went to bed. We did not discuss my fire again, and because I tried very hard not to use it, the others seemed to eventually forget about it. I could not forget. I could feel it, pulsing beneath my skin, a caged beast waiting for freedom. The blackened stones reminded me of its dangers, but my temper ran short and violent in those days, fueled by father's cruelty, and it was only a matter of time before the fire erupted again. Five Davao, 575 AF. It started with an argument, of course, perhaps 6 months after the incident with the fireplace. My eyebrows had at last grown back, though they still itched and irritated me. It had been an abnormally hot summer, and the fields browned and wilted beneath an unforgiving sun. I sweltered in the motionless air as Reese and I started the second planting. The others had retreated into the relative cool of the house, and I resented them for it as I struggled to push our cumbersome hand plow through the reluctant soil, cursing the loss of Rennick. Reese trailed behind me, a bag of seed slung across his chest, dropping handfuls of corn into the furrows before covering them with soft dirt. It was monotonous work, and he hated it, pestering me constantly for a turn at the plow. "No," I repeated for what felt like the 100th time. "It's too heavy and dangerous." "No, it's not," he argued. "You just don't want to plant." "Don't be stupid." I wiped sweat from my brow with my forearm, squinting across the long length of the field I still had to plow. "The blade on this thing is razor sharp. I'm not going to let you lose a limb." "I'm not stupid." He yanked off the bag of seed, dropping it to the ground with a soft thump. His dirt-smeared hands fisted at his sides. "You're stupid and lazy." I glared, dropping the plow to face him. My head ached. I didn't have time for this argument. "I'm not lazy. The plow's too big for you. Now stop being stupid so we can get this done." "I'm not stupid." His fist snaked out, catching me in the lip. My mouth flooded with the taste of blood. I lifted my hand and released my fire. I regretted it the instant it was done. Blue flames engulfed my brother, blackening the ground around us and turning the iron plow red hot. The seed bag was reduced to ash, the corn within exploding and scattering around us like scorched snowflakes. The air was filled with smoke and the choking reek of char. I was certain I had killed him, and my mouth was already open to scream in horror. But the flames died, and Reese still stood in front of me. Angry, certainly, but otherwise unharmed. "You trying to kill me?" he yelled. I. My knees buckled, and I collapsed onto the ground. My breath came in short, ragged gasps, and black dots danced before my eyes. He shoved my head between my knees, holding me there until I no longer felt as if I would pass out. Slowly, I sat up, though I continued to shake. Reese squatted in front of me, his gaze hard and unsympathetic and far, far older than it should have been. "You shouldn't use weapons unless you intend to kill." He spoke softly, but I thought the weight of his words might crush me. "Your fire isn't a toy." "I'm sorry." My voice emerged as a raw whisper, tears burning my eyes. "I'm so sorry." "The rage will always be there, Brannon." Something moved behind his eyes, a shadow I didn't understand. "Either learn to control it, or it will control you." I swallowed and nodded. He offered me a hand and helped me back to my feet, a lightning-fast grin crossing his face. "Now, may I please use the plow?" We never told the others. I was ashamed and shaken, and Reese seemed to forget about it almost as soon as we were done retilling the ground. The late summer rains finally arrived, washing away what remained of my near-fatal mistake. I had nightmares for months, clawing my way out of sleep, shaking and sweating, my nose filled with the stench of char. I would get up to check on Reese, needing to reassure myself that he was indeed alive. I think Chrissa suspected something, though she never said anything to me. For my part, I had resolved to never again use my fire. My fear of hurting the others was simply too high. I did begin watching Reese for signs of strangeness, but he seemed to have returned to being a normal 9-year-old boy. His eyes were bright and cheerful, lacking the weight that they had held in the field. Whatever it had been that allowed him to live through the flames, I saw no further evidence of it. He was a mystery, one I was afraid to solve.